"Emma, this isn't your place anymore," my mother said. Her voice didn't shake. She said it the way people talk about the weather, like she'd been waiting for the right day to say it. The clinking of forks went on for a few seconds after that. My brother looked down at his plate. My sister pretended to check her phone. No one asked what she meant. Everyone already knew. I stared at the roast chicken in front of me, the one I'd helped her cook, and wondered when I became an unwanted guest at my own family's table. I said quietly, "You mean I should leave?" She took a sip of water and nodded. "You're 19, Emma. It's time you learn to stand on your own." My father didn't even look up. He just muttered, "Your mother's right." That was it. No fight, no warning, just a decision made somewhere between the salt and the silence. My mother turned to my sister and smiled. "You'll come with me. I've already spoken to your college about transferring credits." Then to my brother she said, "Your dad needs your help at the new shop." She never said where I fit. I remember the scrape of my chair as I pushed back from the table. It sounded too loud in that quiet room. "And me?" I asked. My father finally looked up then, the way you look at something you'd rather not deal with. "You'll figure it out. You're good at that." I wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. My sister reached for the bread basket, like nothing had happened. That small movement hurt more than everything else. I walked to the sink, washed my plate, and dried it slowly. My hands were shaking, but I made sure they didn't see. My mother said, "There's no need for drama, Emma." I said, "Don't worry, I won't give you any." I left the plate upside down to drain and turned to the door. No one tried to stop me. Not one word followed me to the hallway. I closed the door softly behind me because I still couldn't slam it. I guess some habits die slower than love. I remember that sound, the soft latch. It became the last thing connecting me to them. I'm Emma Clark, 28 now, a paralegal in Denver, and I still remember that night. The smell of roasted chicken and the scrape of that chair. Maybe you know what it's like to be the child left with nothing but silence. If you do, stay. I'll tell you how that girl survived. The porch light went off behind me as I reached the street. I stood there for a while, waiting for someone to call my name. No one did, so I kept walking. The first night, I sat on a bench outside the bus station and told myself it was temporary. I watched the buses come and go, people hugging, laughing, carrying things they loved. I had one small bag with a sweater, a toothbrush, and $23. I didn't cry. I just stared at the yellow lights and thought about how my mother didn't even ask where I'd sleep. I told myself I'd call them tomorrow. Tomorrow came and no one picked up. I left a message for my dad, then one for my mom. My sister's number was disconnected. I waited 2 days before I stopped trying. The silence was louder than traffic. I found a shelter that took women under 21. The woman at the desk smiled, handed me a blanket, and said, "You're safe here." It was the first kind thing anyone had said in weeks. The cot was thin, the air cold, but at least someone noticed I existed. I got used to the metallic smell of wet floors, the soft coughs in the dark, the hum of the heater that barely worked. It wasn't home, but it was a place to close my eyes without fear. Every morning I searched for jobs. People looked at my wrinkled clothes and turned me away before I finished asking. One night, I sat in the diner window, counting coins for coffee I couldn't afford. The waitress said, "You look hungry." I nodded. She slid a plate of fries across the counter and whispered, "Don't worry about it." The next day, I asked the manager if he needed help. He looked me up and down and said, "You ever wash dishes?" I said, "I can learn." That's how I started. Hands in cold water, feet sore, hair tied back with a rubber band I found on the floor. The first time I earned a paycheck, I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't much, but it was proof I could survive without anyone's approval. I rented a room with no heat and shared a bathroom with strangers, but it was mine. I learned the rhythm of survival: work, eat, rest, repeat. Sometimes, on my way home, I'd see families through lit windows and feel that old ache, but I never stopped walking. The world felt indifferent, but I realized strangers could be warmer than blood. One evening, when I stayed late to clean the kitchen, the owner, a heavy man named Mr. Miller, came in holding an old notebook. "You've been quiet," he said. I shrugged. Nothing much to say. He slid the notebook toward me. "This was my father's ledger. We used to write what people owed us." He smiled faintly. "Go on. Write something." I stared at the empty page for a long time. Then I wrote one word: respect. 3 years passed before I realized how quiet my life had become. I worked mornings at the diner and spent nights in a classroom that smelled like chalk and coffee. Law wasn't my dream. It was a language I wanted to learn. Because back then, I believed that if I understood justice, maybe I could understand why it never protected people like me. I rented a small room above a laundromat. The walls were thin, and the hum of the dryers below never stopped. But I liked the noise. It filled the silence that used to swallow me whole. Some nights I'd sit by the window and watch people walking home from work, laughing, holding takeout bags, calling someone who was waiting for them. I'd think, someone is expecting them. No one ever waited for me. In class, I listened more than I spoke. When professors talked about fairness, I felt a small sting, like the word didn't belong to me. I watched families in the courthouse corridor, parents whispering advice, siblings hugging after hearings. I used to imagine walking beside them, pretending I had someone who'd say, "You'll be fine." But I walked alone, every single time. One evening, after another long shift and another long lecture, I came home to find a letter slipped under my door. It was cream-colored, neat, the kind my mother used to keep in her desk. The handwriting was hers, soft, careful, trembling slightly like the ink itself was nervous. My chest tightened before I even opened it. It said, "Emma, your sister graduates next month. We'd like you to come." She'd like that too. No apology, no question. Just a polite invitation, written as if nothing had ever happened. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the paper between my fingers. The smell of the envelope brought me back instantly. Roasted chicken, lemon soap, the faint scent of my mother's perfume that used to cling to everything. It felt like opening a door I had nailed shut. Part of me wanted to tear it apart and throw it away. Another part wanted to see them, to prove that I'd survived without their help. I stared at the RSVP card for a long time. There were 3 boxes. Yes, no, maybe. My hand hovered over the pen. My chest ached, not from longing, but from the weight of remembering. I thought about my sister walking across that stage, smiling in photos, a family around her. And me, standing somewhere in the back, invisible as always. Still, I couldn't ignore the faint tremor in my mother's handwriting. Guilt has a way of aging the hand that writes it. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't. I'll never really know. I circled maybe. Then I caught that scent again, the one that used to fill our hallway after dinner, and it made my throat tighten. For a second, it felt like I was 19 again, standing outside a locked door, waiting for someone to call my name. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on the desk. It looked harmless there, small and quiet, like it hadn't just cracked open years I'd buried. I told myself I'd decide later, but deep down I already knew. That smell, the one of home that was never really mine, was enough to wake something I'd worked hard to silence. I turned off the lamp and lay back, staring at the ceiling. The hum of the dryers below filled the room again, steady and dull. I closed my eyes and whispered to no one. Maybe isn't always about choice. Sometimes it's just another way to say I'm not ready. The envelope sat on the desk, untouched, but the air around it felt heavy, like memory itself was breathing again. And I knew sleep wouldn't come easily that night. The parking lot was full when I arrived, but I parked. Anyway, right in the front row like I belonged there. I told myself I wasn't going to cause a scene. I just wanted to see my sister graduate. That was all. When I stepped inside the hall, the air smelled like flowers and perfume, too polished, too perfect. I spotted my mother first. She was laughing, touching someone's arm, looking younger than she had any right to. She looked straight past me, like I was invisible. I walked closer, waiting for her to recognize me. Her eyes flicked toward me once, then away again. "Ema," she said finally, her tone soft but cold. "You came." I nodded. "It's her big day." My sister turned around when she heard my voice. She looked like a version of my mother's dream. Silk dress, polished smile, gold bracelet that matched the one on Mom's wrist. She blinked at me, as if I were some distant cousin she couldn't quite place. "Wow," she said, forcing a laugh. "I didn't know you were coming. You could have told us." I said, "It was a last-minute decision." She smiled, but her eyes said I'd already ruined her picture. I sat in the back row. The speeches dragged on, applause echoing off the walls. When my sister's name was called, the crowd cheered. My mother cried into a tissue. My father stood and clapped like a proud man who never failed anyone. I stayed seated, hands in my lap. When it was over, people took photos, hugging, laughing. I waited until they started to leave before walking toward them. My sister saw me first. "Hey," she said, tilting her head. "You can join the group picture if you want." Her tone was polite, like she was offering a seat to a stranger. My mother said quietly, "Maybe let's just get the family ones first." That word, family, cut deeper than it should have. I smiled. Of course, wouldn't want to ruin the frame. My sister laughed lightly, unsure if I was joking. My father stayed silent. He looked everywhere but at me. I held out a small box wrapped in paper I'd bought from the dollar store. "This is for you," I said. My sister hesitated, then took it. "You didn't have to get me anything." "I know," I said. "I wanted to." She smiled, half-hearted, and slipped it into her purse without opening it. Her friends called her over for more pictures. She turned, waved, and left me standing beside the empty chairs. I could have walked away right then, but I didn't. I stayed long enough to see my mother fix my sister's hair, my father adjusting her gown. It was the same tenderness I'd spent years trying to earn. I realized then I hadn't come for closure. I'd come to see the truth, how easy it was for them to move on without me. My mother finally turned to me. "You look tired," she said, almost as if it were a compliment. "Working too much?" I nodded. "Just enough to keep going." She smiled faintly, the kind that says good for you, but not really. My father joined her, sliding his arm around her shoulders. "We should head out. Dinner reservations." I asked, "Where?" My sister answered for him. "Private place downtown. They only booked enough seats for the family." I wanted to laugh, but I just said, "Makes sense." My mother gave me that practiced smile again. "Don't take it personally, Ema." "I never do," I said. I turned to leave. My father's voice followed, low enough that no one else could hear. "Don't embarrass us." I stopped, looked at him, and said, "That would require you to claim me first." He said nothing. I walked out holding the little envelope that came with my gift receipt. The paper trembled slightly in my hand, but not from weakness. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just finally seeing them for who they were. As the door closed behind me, I realized I had spent years chasing their love, when all I ever needed was distance. The restaurant was loud, but somehow at our table, it felt quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace, just avoidance. I sat near the edge, a little out of the circle, pretending I didn't notice how every conversation flowed around me. My mother raised her glass first. Her smile was perfect, her voice steady. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she said. Her eyes lingered on my sister, then my father, then a few family friends sitting close by. She didn't look at me once. She went on, listing everyone who helped make this day possible. She thanked her coworkers for arranging the flowers. She thanked her neighbor for helping with parking. She even thanked the waiter for keeping things so beautiful. Then she put her glass down and smiled proudly, as if she hadn't just erased me from the entire room. No one noticed. Or maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't want to be the one to say it. My sister leaned closer and whispered, "Mom's just nervous. Don't take it the wrong way." I smiled. "I'm not taking it anyway." She nodded, relieved, like she'd just dodged a storm that never came. The waiter poured more champagne. My father lifted his glass and said, "To family." Everyone repeated it. I raised mine too, though I didn't drink. The bubbles looked like tiny lies rising to the surface. When dessert menus came, I stood up quietly. My mother looked over, her smile still frozen in place. "Leaving already?" "I have an early morning," I said. She nodded like it didn't matter either way. I walked out before anyone else could look up. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I leaned against my car and breathed, letting the noise of the restaurant fade behind the glass. The silence out here felt different. It wasn't empty. It was honest. I thought about how strange it was to sit at a table full of people who shared my blood and feel more like a stranger than ever. Sometimes silence cuts deeper than insults. At least insults acknowledge you exist. I looked up at the dark sky and whispered to myself, what would you have done? Stayed and smiled? Or walked away? Maybe someone out there has an answer. I opened my car door, ready to leave. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, hesitant ones. I turned and saw my brother walking toward me, hands in his pockets, eyes uncertain. "Emma," he said quietly. "Wait." I froze, half inside the car. He looked around before speaking again. "Dad's business is failing," he said. "They might need you." For a second, I almost laughed. After all that silence, they suddenly remembered I existed. I just stared at him, waiting for the part where it made sense. But it didn't. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The years passed quietly, one file, one client, one late night at a time. I became good at what I did. Contracts, disputes, the cold language of fairness written in black ink. People came to me desperate, confused, afraid of losing what they owned. I always found a way to help them. Maybe because I knew what it felt like to lose everything and have no one fight for you. Some mornings I'd sit at my desk before the office filled up, sipping burnt coffee, thinking about how far I'd come. Not happy exactly, just steady. Peace, I learned, was built from routine. It was never given. That morning, the phone rang while I was reviewing a case file. The number wasn't saved, but the voice. I knew it instantly. "Emma," my father said, like he was testing if I'd hang up. I didn't. He cleared his throat. "We've been having some trouble. The house, the bank's threatening foreclosure." I stayed quiet. He went on. "We could really use someone who understands these things. You work with lawyers now, don't you?" For a second, I thought I misheard him. The same man who told me to figure it out was now calling because he couldn't. I said, "You mean the house you kicked me out of?" He hesitated, then said softly, "Let's not drag up the past." It was almost funny how easily he said it, like the past wasn't sitting right between us, breathing. I agreed to meet, not to help, but to see. I wanted to look at the people who once made me feel small and watch them need something from me. The next day I drove to the old neighborhood. The streets looked smaller, the houses older. Even the trees felt tired. When I pulled up to the house, I almost didn't recognize it. The paint was chipped, the porch sagged, the fence leaned like it had given up standing straight. It didn't feel like my childhood home. It felt like a ghost wearing familiar clothes. I rang the bell. My heart didn't race this time. The door opened, and there she was, my mother. She looked the same, just older. Her hair was shorter, her smile practiced. For a second, I waited for her to say something real. Instead, she opened her arms slightly, her voice light. "Oh, Emma, we were just thinking about you lately." And in that moment, I knew exactly why I had come. The folder was thick with papers, the kind that smell like old ink and dust. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one I used to eat dinner at, and spread everything out in front of me. Deeds, transfers, tax receipts, my family's version of a confession. My father cleared his throat. "It's just some paperwork we missed when your grandfather passed. Nothing complicated." I said nothing. My mother added, "The lawyer said it just needs your signature to clear everything up." Her voice had that same practiced warmth I remembered from childhood. Sweet, but always leading somewhere. I picked up the first document. My grandfather's name was printed across the top. Below it, 2 signatures, my parents'. The ink was uneven, the handwriting shaky. not his. I could tell right away. He had written with long strokes, neat, deliberate. This looked rushed. I looked at my father. "Who signed this?" He blinked. "Your grandfather, of course." I slid the page closer to him. "Then why is this dated a week after he died?" Silence. My mother laughed softly. "Oh, Emma, you're reading too much into it." Her words carried the same tone she used when I was a child, when I'd ask questions that made her uncomfortable. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet stretch. They needed something from me, and for the first time in years, I could feel it. The power shift. I went through each page slowly. Joint ownership, property title, inheritance claims. They'd rewritten everything to make it look like they'd always owned the house, and all they needed now was my consent, one signature, to make the forgery disappear. My father said, "You know the house means everything to us." I looked up. "Does it?" He hesitated. "It's family property." I smiled faintly. "It stopped feeling like family the day you locked the door behind me." My mother sighed. "We're trying to fix things, Emma. Why hold on to the past?" Because the past, I thought, was the only thing that hadn't lied to me. I stacked the papers neatly, aligning the corners. My father leaned forward. "So you'll sign?" I looked at him for a long moment. "I'll think about it." He smiled, relieved, thinking he'd won something. He hadn't. That night, when they went upstairs, I stayed in the kitchen. The clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed, and I opened my briefcase. Every page went into the copier, front and back. Each sound of the machine felt like a heartbeat returning to me. When I was done, I slipped the copies into a folder of my own. The originals went back where they were, untouched. They would never know. As I left, I paused at the doorway. I looked around at the house I once begged to stay in. The walls felt smaller now, like they were shrinking under the weight of their lies. They wanted my signature to make the fraud disappear. But I'd already signed something far more permanent in my mind, a quiet promise. I walked out with the folder under my arm, my heart steady, my footsteps soft. The night air felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time, I didn't feel like the girl they had left behind. I felt like the woman who'd finally learned how to take everything back, without saying a word. The office was quiet when I opened the file again. I'd read these pages before, but this time, I noticed something I hadn't. Buried in the fine print, under legal jargon and dates, was a line that didn't belong. A clause, written in my grandfather's careful handwriting. If any false transfer or forged ownership is proven, the property reverts to the most financially independent descendant. My breath caught. Financially independent. That was me. I read it twice, then again, tracing the words with my finger. It wasn't a loophole. It was a warning. He must have known they'd try something like this. It was his way of making sure justice found its way home, even if he wasn't here to see it. For a long time, I just sat there, listening to the sound of the clock on my desk. Each tick felt heavier than the last. Not out of guilt, out of understanding. They thought I'd be naive forever, the daughter who stayed quiet, who didn't ask questions. They built their comfort on that silence. I leaned back, whispering to myself, "Justice isn't revenge. It's clarity in daylight." And I meant it. This wasn't about punishment anymore. It was about truth being written where everyone could see it. I spent the next few hours going through everything again. Dates, signatures, notarizations. Each inconsistency told a story. My father's rushed handwriting, my mother's nervous initials. Documents filed from their joint account during a week they'd claimed to be traveling. They had been sloppy, thinking no one would ever look this close. I printed copies, labeled them, stored backups on a drive. Every step was quiet, deliberate, almost ceremonial. For once, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. I thought about calling them, about asking how it felt to know their lies had an expiration date. But I didn't. Silence was my language now, and it spoke louder than confrontation ever could. The sun had started setting through my window when my phone buzzed. It was my sister. Her name still made my stomach twist in ways I couldn't explain. The message was short. "Mom says you're being difficult again." I stared at it for a long time. No greeting, no question. Just another reminder that, in their eyes, I was the problem for not making their lies easier to live with. I put the phone down without replying. The copies were stacked neatly beside me, the evidence sealed and ready. I exhaled slowly, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger, control. This time, the story wouldn't be rewritten without me. He chose a corner table, away from the windows. I spotted him before he saw me, shoulders hunched, hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had probably gone cold. When I walked up, he tried to smile. "Hey, Em?" It was quiet, uncertain. I sat down, nodding slightly. The air between us was filled with everything we'd never said. He spoke first. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be." I didn't reply. He rubbed his face, exhaling. "I always knew Mom and Dad treated you unfairly. I saw it, but I didn't say anything." His voice cracked near the end, the kind of sound that almost earned sympathy if it came 10 years earlier. I looked at him, calm. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because keeping quiet was easier." That was the difference between us. I lost everything because I refused to stay silent. He kept everything by pretending he didn't see. I said softly, "Fear keeps good people small, but you weren't afraid. You were comfortable." He stared down, his fingers tightening around the cup. "You're right," he whispered. There was no defense, no excuse, just regret, sitting between us like a shadow that wouldn't move. He finally looked up. "They're planning something. They said you've been difficult again." The word made me laugh quietly. "Difficult," I repeated. "That's what they call honesty when it stops working for them." He nodded slowly. "They're talking about going legal, getting you to sign over your rights or painting you as unstable if you don't." His words didn't surprise me. They only confirmed what I already sensed. I said, "They still think they can win by pretending I'm the problem." He didn't argue. The silence stretched long enough to feel heavy. He leaned back, eyes tired. "I never wanted it to get this far." "It always gets this far when people refuse to stop pretending," I said. He looked out the window like the answer might be out there. Then quietly he said, "I wish I'd done something sooner." I stirred my coffee slowly. "Wishing doesn't change the math," I said. "You stayed safe. They stayed powerful. I stayed forgotten. Everyone got what they wanted." He closed his eyes for a second, nodding, accepting the truth he couldn't rewrite. Then he looked at me again. "Just be careful, Em. They know how to pull your heart before they pull your hand." I looked at him, the brother who watched from the sidelines, who now wanted to warn me of the game he helped keep alive. "I'm not the same person they raised," I said. He gave a small broken smile. "I know. That's what scares them." When he left, he touched my shoulder briefly, like he wanted to say something more but didn't know how. I watched him walk out into the street and disappear into the crowd. I sat there for a while, staring at my reflection in the window. The question wouldn't leave me. Do people ever change, or do they just get better at pretending? When I finally stood to leave, my phone buzzed on the table. A new email. The subject line read, "Notice of civil action. Interference with property transfer." It was from their attorney. No greeting, no warning, just cold words in bold letters. They were suing me. I closed the message, my hand steady. The coffee had gone cold, but my resolve hadn't. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and tension. I stood at the plaintiff's table alone, a stack of files beside me, calm hands folded over truth that didn't need decoration. Across from me sat my parents, neatly dressed, rehearsed, confident. They didn't look at me. Not once. The clerk called the case. Their attorney stood, voice smooth and polite. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of property correction, a misunderstanding between family members." A misunderstanding. That's what they called fraud now. I waited for my turn. When the judge nodded, I stepped forward. Your Honor, I began quietly. The misunderstanding began when two signatures appeared on a deed that never belonged to them. I handed the judge the copies, every line I'd studied until I could see them in my sleep. The judge skimmed through, brow tightening slightly. My mother shifted in her seat, whispering something to my father. He didn't respond. Their lawyer tried to interject. Miss Clark has always had emotional grievances with her parents. It's possible she's misinterpreting events. I looked directly at him. Emotional grievances don't create notarized evidence, I said softly. He stopped mid-breath. The judge glanced up, a flicker of curiosity breaking through her professionalism. I kept my voice steady. This isn't revenge. I'm not asking for what's theirs. I'm asking for what was never meant to be taken. The words didn't tremble. They landed the way silence does, slow and heavy. For the first time, I saw something shift in my mother's eyes. Not guilt, recognition. The kind that arrives when pretending no longer works. Their attorney shuffled papers, trying to redirect. He asked about family bonds, reconciliation, forgiveness. I listened to every word and felt nothing. I'd spent years carrying guilt for simply surviving their neglect. Now they were using forgiveness like currency. The judge turned toward me. Her tone softened. Why didn't you speak sooner, Miss Clark? The question hung in the air. I met her eyes. Because I was taught to stay quiet. My voice didn't crack. It didn't need to. Every silence I'd ever swallowed spoke for me. The room went still. Even the sound of papers stopped. The judge leaned back, studying me for a long moment, then looked toward my parents. Their confidence had wilted, not destroyed, just exposed. She finally said, I'll need time to review all this. The ruling is postponed. Postponed. The word echoed like a held breath. Not a victory, not yet. But something had shifted. I gathered my papers slowly. My father avoided my eyes. My mother pretended to check her purse. The same people who once told me to find my own way couldn't even meet the woman who did. When I stepped outside, the air felt wider than it used to. The courthouse doors closed behind me with a soft click, sealing in everything I no longer needed to carry. There would be another day, another hearing, another chance for truth to finish its work. But for the first time, I didn't feel small in their world. I felt seen, not by them, but by myself. The courtroom was packed this time. I could feel their eyes, the quiet curiosity of strangers trying to measure a family's decay in real time. My parents sat stiffly beside their lawyer, both of them dressed for control. Their faces carried the same confidence they wore at every family dinner, the kind that only exists when they believe no one will ever challenge them. The judge asked me to proceed. I opened the folder, my hands steady. Inside were two documents, one they'd forged, and one my grandfather had sealed himself. I held up the transfer first. This, I said, is the version they filed. The ink looked fresh, but the signature wasn't. The curve of his letters was wrong, his initials too wide. I'd compared them to dozens of his papers. He never signed that way. Their attorney leaned forward. Miss Clark, you're suggesting your parents falsified a legal transfer? I looked at him and said quietly, I'm not suggesting. I'm showing you. I handed the second envelope to the clerk. It was the sealed addendum, my grandfather's handwriting, notarized, dated 2 months after the alleged transfer. The judge read the first lines out loud. In the event of any misrepresentation or fraudulent alteration, the property shall default to my granddaughter, Emma Clark. The room changed after that. The lawyer froze mid-note. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw tightened until I heard his teeth grind. They didn't look shocked, just caught. He muttered under his breath, She must have found it. And for the first time, I didn't lower my head. I looked straight at him and said, I didn't find it. It found me. Their attorney cleared his throat, stammering something about new evidence, but his voice cracked halfway through. Even he couldn't pretend this away. The judge looked at me again. Miss Clark, where was this located? In my grandfather's personal safe, I said. He left me the combination in his will. He knew they'd come for it. The words felt like iron in my mouth. Heavy, true, final. My father leaned back and whispered to my mother. She planned this. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Every piece of their story was unraveling, one silent truth at a time. And for the first time in years, I didn't need to speak loudly. They built their empire on silence. I learned to weaponize it. The judge set the papers down and removed her glasses. Her tone was calm, measured. This will require verification, she said, but the implications are significant. I nodded once. I understand. She looked at me longer than before, studying something in my expression. Not anger, not pride, just calm certainty. When the gavel struck, it wasn't final, just delayed. Court is adjourned, she said. The sound echoed across the room, hollow and powerful. I gathered my files while my parents sat motionless, like they were waiting for someone to wake them from a dream that had finally run out of script. As I walked toward the exit, the doors opened to a wall of flashbulbs. Reporters shouted my name, asking what happened, asking what I'd uncovered. I said nothing. I didn't need to. The truth was already speaking for me. The ruling came early in the morning. One email, one line. Ownership officially reverted to me. No ceremony, no apology, just a digital sentence that felt like oxygen. My phone started buzzing before I even finished reading it. First, my sister. Her voice was sharp through the voicemail. You're unbelievable, Emma. You've destroyed this family. All over money. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. It was never about money. It was about breathing without permission. Then came my mother's messages. Long paragraphs. Family is unity, Emma. You don't turn on your own blood. Your grandfather would hate what you've done. He's gone, but his values should still guide us. Each text felt like the same sermon wrapped in guilt. I read them once, then turned off notifications. By afternoon, the silence felt like a room I'd never been allowed to enter before. I opened a bottle of cheap wine I'd bought on sale, poured it into a chipped glass. It tasted like nothing special, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I didn't feel watched, corrected, or diminished. I sat by the window, looking at the quiet street below, the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. Peace doesn't roar. It breathes. It moves through you slowly until you forget what noise ever felt like. My sister tried calling again that evening. I let it ring. Then another message arrived. You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it. I whispered to myself. It was. Because it wasn't revenge that filled me. It was space, finally mine. The house felt too big for celebration, but I raised my glass anyway. To silence, I said softly. The kind that heals, not hides. I looked at the papers on my desk, the proof, the truth, the years that led here. There was no joy, just stillness. Stillness can be holy when it follows years of chaos. The night deepened. I put my phone face down, the screen flashing in the dark. I didn't want to see another message, another plea, another half-truth disguised as love. But when it buzzed again, something about the sound made me look. It wasn't a text this time. It was a voicemail from my father. His voice was rough, older, stripped of its usual certainty. We need to talk, he said. A pause. It's about your grandfather's account. Then the line went silent. I sat there, glass in hand, heart steady. Peace doesn't always last. Sometimes it just pauses to let the next truth in. My father spoke first. We didn't come here to fight. His voice had softened, but it carried that familiar edge, the one that used to end every argument when I was young. I looked across the cafe table at both of them. My mother's hands were folded tight, knuckles pale. The coffee between us was untouched. I said quietly, "Then why are we here?" She exhaled slowly. There are still assets in your name, your grandfather's accounts, some investments tied to the property. We need your cooperation to finalize everything. Her tone was smooth, practiced, like she'd spent hours rehearsing the words that might make me bend. I didn't answer right away. Silence used to make them impatient. Now it made them nervous. My father leaned forward. "It's not much trouble, Emma, just a few signatures." The word signature sat between us like a bruise. He realized what he'd said and tried to backtrack. "I mean, it's just formal stuff for closure." I met his eyes. "Closure for who?" He blinked, caught off guard. My mother stepped in, her voice trembling at the edges. "You're being difficult again. We're trying to make peace." Peace. That word never meant honesty in our house. It meant obedience. I stirred my coffee, slow circles, calm as I said, "Peace doesn't come with paperwork." Her lips pressed thin. She glanced at my father for rescue. He tried a different tone, softer, almost pleading. "Emma, you have no idea how much pressure we're under. We could lose everything if this drags on." I looked at him and remembered the night I begged for tuition help at 19, how he turned away and said, "You'll figure it out." I did. And I remembered what that silence felt like, the one they taught me to survive. I said, "You'll figure it out." He flinched. "You don't have to do this," he muttered. "I already did," I replied. His eyes lowered to the table. For the first time, he had nothing to add. My mother tried one last time. Her voice cracked under the weight of years she pretended didn't exist. "After everything we've been through, after raising you, this is how you treat us?" I looked at her, not angry, just done. "You raised me to be independent. Keep yours." The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was hollow. Desperation looked like my reflection from years ago, sitting outside their door, begging to be heard. Now they were the ones waiting, but I had nothing left to give. I stood up, slid my chair back slowly. My father started to say something, but the words collapsed before they reached me. The cafe lights flickered against the glass, catching the calm on my face. For the first time, I didn't feel like their child. I felt free. I turned toward the door and walked away, their voices fading behind me. They called my name once, soft, uncertain, but I kept walking. Some endings don't need closure. They just need distance. Rain always has a sound that feels familiar to me. Soft, steady, like the world finally deciding to whisper instead of shout. I walked through it that morning with my coat pulled tight, a folded check in my pocket, and no destination anyone else would understand. The shelter sat on the same corner it always had, small, gray, and worn. When I stepped inside, the smell of coffee and damp clothes hit me like memory. A volunteer smiled and asked, "Looking for someone?" I shook my head. "No, just leaving something behind." I handed her the envelope. She looked down, surprised. "This is a donation?" I nodded once. "From someone who used to sleep here." Her eyes softened. She started to say thank you, but I stopped her gently. "You already did, years ago." I walked back out before the warmth in the room could undo me. The rain hadn't let up. It streaked across the streetlights, turned the pavement silver. I passed the diner without planning to stop, but my feet had their own memory. The same cracked sign, the same corner booth where I once counted coins for coffee. Inside, it looked smaller now. Or maybe I'd just grown into myself. The waitress behind the counter recognized me halfway through wiping a glass. "Emma, right?" Her voice carried the same tired kindness as years before. "Been a long time," I smiled faintly. "Yeah, I owed this place one more visit." She slid a menu toward me out of habit. "Same coffee?" I nodded. "Black, no sugar." As she poured, I glanced at the counter near the register. The old ledger still sat there, the one where locals left words instead of tips. Little scribbles of hope, reminders, goodbyes. I flipped to the last page I remembered, the one labeled respect. The handwriting hadn't changed much over the years. Still messy, still honest. My reflection caught faintly in the plastic cover as I pulled out a pen. I hesitated for a second, feeling the weight of everything that came before this moment. The begging, the silence, the courtroom, the release. Then I wrote one word beneath the last entry. Reclaimed. The pen bled slightly into the paper, just enough to make it part of the page. I closed the ledger and pushed it back where it belonged. When I stood up, the waitress smiled. Leaving? Already? Yeah, I said softly. I've finally got somewhere to be. The bell over the door chimed as I stepped out. Rain met my face, cool and forgiving. For the first time, I didn't rush to escape it. I let it fall, because peace doesn't always come in sunshine. Sometimes it walks beside you quietly, one drop at a time. The night was quiet except for the sound of my pen moving across paper, one letter after another. No greetings, no apologies, just words that had waited too long. To my mother I wrote, "You wanted control, not care. I confused one for the other for too many years. I forgive you, not because you asked, but because I'm done carrying what you built in me." To my father I wrote, "You taught me silence. You called it strength, but it was fear wearing a mask. I learned to speak anyway." To my sister I wrote, "You weren't cruel. You were scared of being ignored. I know that now. I forgive you too, but we're not walking the same road anymore." Each line came out softer than I expected. Forgiveness doesn't feel like light. It feels like air finally reaching lungs that forgot how to breathe. When I finished, I stacked the letters neatly on the table. They looked small, insignificant really, compared to the weight they carried before I wrote them. I didn't need to send them. They weren't for them. They were for me. I stepped out onto the balcony with the stack in my hands. The city below hummed with its usual indifference. Cars, sirens, laughter from a bar 2 blocks away. Life kept going, no matter how much we clung to the past. I lit a match, held it for a second, and touched it to the first page. The flame caught fast. The edges curled inward, the paper folding into itself like it was tired too. I dropped each letter into a small metal bowl, one by one. The fire whispered as it worked, soft, almost kind. Ash replaced ink. Smoke carried names I no longer needed to hold. I watched the last piece crumble, black turning to gray. Forgiveness doesn't erase the story. It just removes the need to keep reading it. I turned to walk back inside, and that's when I noticed the ember. Tiny, alive, floating down slow, landing right on the corner of the old legal folder I'd left on the balcony table. For a second, I thought about putting it out, but then I didn't. The paper hissed. A thin line of orange spread through the corner of the page, bright, deliberate. I just stood there, watching it eat the lies, the signatures, the history. It felt like watching an old ghost fade for good. I didn't move until it was all gone. The ash lifted in the wind, drifting into the night. Light, free, untraceable. Exactly how I wanted to feel. The morning air was cool, quiet, almost kind. I didn't have anywhere I needed to be. No hearing, no deadlines, no calls waiting for my answer. For the first time in years, the day belonged to me. I took the long way home, or what used to be home. The street looked smaller now, like time had folded it inward. I could still trace the cracks in the sidewalk where I once dragged my suitcase after being told I didn't belong. I remember the sound of that door closing. It used to echo in my chest for months. Now it was just background noise to a different life. When I reached the house, I almost didn't recognize it. Fresh paint, new porch lights, workers moving around with buckets and laughter. The yard that once felt like a battlefield was just another patch of grass under a stranger's care. For a second, I stood there, watching them carry things in and out, and I felt nothing sharp, just stillness. A woman stepped out, maybe in her 40s, kind face, strong hands. She smiled politely. "Can I help you?" I smiled back. "No, I was just passing through." She nodded, like she understood something unspoken. then turned back inside. And just like that, I realized I didn't miss it. Not the walls, not the voices, not the weight. I kept walking. My reflection followed in the windows of parked cars. Same face, softer eyes. People always say healing looks loud, like laughter or celebration. But mine looked like this: steady steps on an ordinary morning, no applause, no witnesses. A few blocks away, I stopped at a crosswalk. A little girl held her father's hand beside me. She looked up at him and said, "I'm not scared anymore." He smiled and said, "Good, you don't have to be." I smiled too. Maybe that was all any of us ever needed to hear. When I got home, the apartment smelled faintly of coffee and rain from last night. The balcony door was still open, letting the breeze carry the scent of ash and freedom. I made tea instead of wine this time. Small change, same peace. The steam rose slow, quiet, honest. It felt like the world whispering, "You did it." I thought about the people who might be listening to this now, the ones sitting in silence, wondering if it will ever stop hurting. It does. Not suddenly, not completely. But one morning, you wake up and the past doesn't chase you anymore. It just sits behind you, tired while you keep walking forward. If my story reminded you that silence can heal stronger than hate, stay with this channel. I tell stories for people who made it out quietly. I looked out at the street again, at the light catching the windows of buildings I used to avoid. There was no revenge left to taste, no pain left to prove, just air, soft and new. I never needed an apology, just peace, and that I gave myself.